All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Talking Preps. Happy Memorial Day, especially to you, Chris Hughes. Happy Memorial Day. Thanks for everything you did for our country. Salute.
Thank you.
That's Veterans Day, but
Thank you, sir.
That too. How you, Dale?
Dead.
How you, Dale?
Good.
I see you have your NC State shirt on.
Yeah, we had that discussion, so yeah, I put it on.
All right. We're going to bring in somebody who might be a little familiar with the NC State shirt. We got
that on too.
NC State coach. So you got a hat on for you too, Coach.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dale, you're looking good, brother.
We have more of those hats around here than I can count.
We got Dave Doeren, the head football coach at NC State. Been there going to your 8th season coming up, Coach.
I know it's going fast, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's
first question we're asking all the –
I think that's 56 years in dog years, Langston, long time.
Yeah, we're asking all the coaches, what are you guys doing during the coronavirus pandemic? How you been passing the time?
Between things like this, I've been spending a lot of time with my family. That's been the blessing in all of this. It's just, in my going on 10 years as a head coach and 20-some as a college coach, you just don't get this kind of time with your child, your children and your wife. And Sarah and I have spent a lot of good time together and been around the 3 sons and Sarah as much as I could be.
Yeah. How much is not having spring practice going to hurt you guys?
Well, I think reps are so precious, and I don't think there's anything more important than building good habits, and those happen from a massive amount of reps. And so it always hurts to lose reps with your guys, but I guess we're all in the same boat in this thing. So you don't feel like anyone's had a chance to maybe do more than you've done from that standpoint of coaching your guys. But for us, we had a very young football team, and you would have loved to have gotten those guys on the grass a little bit more.
Yeah. Guys, if you have any questions for Coach, you can go on Twitter. You can add it to the comments. If you're on Facebook, add it to the comments. We put it on screen. We'll let Coach answer it. One question I do have, Coach, is that do you think we're going to have football this fall? We've been asking everybody we have on their thoughts about, is there a season coming, you think?
I do. I think we're definitely going to play football. Don't know if we're going to start on time or not. Don't know how many games, but I do know that college athletics needs college football for a variety of reasons. I think what our sport gives to the country as well, coming out of this lockdown where everybody's just probably can't wait. I think there's a ton of people watching the golf match yesterday between Tiger and, who was it? Mickelson and Brady. And there's just everybody's starving to watch competition right now, but just seeing how things are trending too, I would say that we're on a good track now to have the game. I just don't know what the stands are going to be like. I have no idea how that's going to play out.
Yeah, absolutely. Coach, the first year you guys are 3-9, I believe, and then after that you have 5 straight winning seasons, 5 bowl bids. I know last year was a tough year, a lot of injury, lost a lot of guys to the pros. How quickly do you think State can bounce back, and is this that bounce back year for you guys?
We plan on being back this year for sure. I think going through what we did last year was very difficult on our staff, on our players, on our fans. And none of us want to live it again. Some of it was out of our control. Some of it wasn't. I think I always look at myself first and my staff and then our team. And I think it was a great offseason, and I thought it brought a lot of ugly things to head. I think that is one of the positive things of going through adversity. It really does uncover some things that might, had you won this game or that game, gotten a bowl game, you might have overlooked it. And so for me, it was a great chance to really look at what's going on. Our players did a phenomenal job of owning their part of it. And together we worked really hard on building some chemistry this winter that I thought helped us quite a bit through this quarantine.
Well, Coach, this family here hopes that this season's a whole lot better next.
I can't hear Dale.
Oh, you can't. Langston, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Coach, what Dale's going to ask you is about missing practice time, kind of what I touched on, but you got a lot of new coordinators coming in, offensive coordinator Tim Beck from Texas with a new system. how's that all going to work out? And is Devin Leary still going to be your starter this year?
Yeah, I think, the one thing that makes the staff changes that we've had unique, Tim and I worked together at Kansas, and so we have a chemistry already. Tim and John Garrison, my offensive line coach, were together for 7 years at Nebraska, and so they have a good chemistry together. And so it's really been more about the other offensive staff members getting used to Tim and how he's going to do things, and they've been awesome. It's been fun seeing Coach Goebel and Coach McDonald and Coach Roper spend time with Tim and those guys building their chemistry. Going into the spring, Devin was our starter and will remain so. And I know Bailey's chomping at the bit to win that job. And like I told Devin, it's his to lose at this point. But we also want all of our players to get better. And we want every single guy on our roster to improve. And it's your job as a starter to hold on to that job. It's your job as the backup to try to take it from them and be prepared to do so.
Coach, speaking of your coaching staff, and I've got experience coaching, and I know that coaching staffs are like a family. You had to make a few coaching changes within your staff here in the offseason. Just tell me a little bit about that, because I know it's always great to put in new blood into your coaching staff, but it's also tough because you become so close with them. Just kind of tell us how that's been for you as a coach moving forward with some new guys.
Yeah. But, it's the hardest thing you do is leader of an organization, I think, is having to make changes. It's painful. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I have great respect for the coaches in my program that have been here, the ones that have left on their own, and the ones that I've had to ask to leave. I think they're all tremendous men. But sometimes you just need to go in a different direction, and I felt like I did for a variety of reasons that I'm not going to get into on this show. But I wish those guys nothing but success down the road. I know they're really good at what they do, and they'll be great given the opportunities, and excited about the new ideas and new chemistry that we're building with the different coaches that we brought in.
And Coach, you got 10 players coming back with starting experience, including three of your top three rushers, 4 of your top 5 receivers. You guys are really poised, I think, to make some noise. Do you think, how do you feel with this crop of guys coming back? And do you think that you guys are going to be able to sneak up on some teams, or how do you feel like it is within the ACC? Because everybody knows who everybody has, but just what's your thoughts with this crop of talent coming back?
Yeah, I think we have an interesting scenario here. A lot of our guys that were injured are now completely healthy and back and ready to play, and they were experienced players. And all these young guys that had to play, we were second to Clemson for a number of freshmen played in college football last year. They all now have a lot of experience, probably before they should have had it. But what you have now is, that group of young guys that got tested, battle tested, really thrown into the fire, and then a bunch of veteran players that had to sit out and watch what went down last year and have a lot of fire in their belly, because losing the game to injury is one of the hardest things, and also gives you more perspective, I think. Not that I would ever want a player to be injured, but I do think they returned to the game with a lot more respect for the game than they had prior to the injury. And so those two groups coming together, it's now about getting them on the grass together and building that chemistry. But I do like the opportunity we have to win a lot more games than we did last year. Whether we sneak up on people or not, I don't know. We have to go out there and out-execute them and outperform them and do our jobs. And I know our guys are excited about that opportunity.
Coach, hopefully you can hear me now.
I got you, Dale.
Okay, good. We want to ask you a little bit about recruiting. Being a State fan, I'm a little concerned about what I'm seeing happening over there in Chapel Hill. But can you tell us a little bit about how things are looking, maybe what you can talk about?
Right.
We see you do have some good commits, like a quarterback out of Georgia. Just maybe what can you tell us what's happening good in Wolfpack Nation?
Well, I think, what happened every year I've been here is the spring and summer have been really good opportunities for us to show off Raleigh. In my opinion, one of the greatest places in the world, and second best place in the world, according to Forbes magazine, to live in the world. And so people come up and they want to visit, and then they're like, oh my God, I didn't know it was like this. And then they get on our campus, and so many great things Chancellor Woodson's done to our campus, and the new buildings that are there, the Hunt Library. They're redoing our rec center on campus, and it's phenomenal. But we can't show it off, And so you come out of a 4-win season, you got new coaches. People want to see them coach. They want to see the players. They want to see the direction of the program, and then all of a sudden they can't. And so we're in a position right now where we're doing the best we can with these Zoom calls. We've got some really good kids we're talking to. Obviously, I can't tell you anything about their names. I love the direction that we're headed with everything, but we need to get people back here. We need to get on the grass. We need to go win some games. And this happened here. I think it was my 3rd year when we came out of a season where we barely got to a bowl game and beat Vanderbilt. And then we had to flip a bunch of recruits in the end after we won 4 out of the last 5 games, and we did that. And then we won 9 in a row, 2 years in a row. So, I'm not going to hit the panic button. I know that this is a really early part of what's going on. And in the past, if you looked at our classes, June was our month where we capitalized, and we just haven't had that opportunity to get people here to do that.
I understand. And I'm sure the pandemic is making this recruiting situation very, very tough.
I think what it's done, Dale, is a lot of these kids have made decisions before they wanted to. And I think a lot of them had plans to come visit us and visit other schools and compare their A, B, C, and D schools and then make decisions. And because of this, some of them have kind of put the pause button on it, and some of them have made decisions earlier than they wanted to. And so I do think you're going to have a lot of people flipping this year based on how the seasons play out.
Gotcha. We want to ask you another question about how the ACC is laid out, and would you like to see it move away from 2 divisions and maybe have the top 2 teams playing for the championship, kind of like the Big 12?
Yeah. That idea has been talked about. I wouldn't be against it. I do think having the best 2 teams in the championship game, and no disrespect to the teams that have gotten there because they've earned their way, but I do think there's something to that. My biggest thing that I dislike about our setup is that with our rival game being a coastal team, we only play one other team from the coastal in a yearly rotation. And so I'm going on my 8th season here, and I've played Duke 1 time, and they're right down the road. I think that's unfair to the student athletes to go to a university and not play teams from the other side during your entire college career. We have a graduating class that never played Duke, and I think that that's not right. I think that the rotation should be set up in a little bit better way for us to have interconference play a little bit more often.
I'm going to say one more thing here is that, I grew up here in North Carolina, and not having the Big 4 teams playing each other, I think it's a disservice to the conference, to the state.
Yeah, I know there's been a ton of ways that it's been discussed, and obviously this is a decision that's way above my pay grade, But if I had my way, I would love to see us, like I said, rotate this thing a little bit more often to get that at least where a kid is, before he graduates, is going to play every team in the ACC.
Yeah, very good point, Coach. Talking about players, you were talking earlier. You had 21 players in the class of 2020 who I think you can talk about that are signed in on your campus, including 8 early enrollees. One of those was one of my favorite players, Porter Rooks at Morris Park High School. Yeah. How have those guys looked? How has Porter looked in particular? Do you see any of those guys making some immediate impacts for you?
Well, starting with Porter, he was having a good spring. He's a very natural player. He sees the field very well. He learns quickly. Coach McDonald and him have a very good relationship. He was making plays. He finds his way to get open. He's got natural ball skills, very mature young man. So we're excited about Porter. And that class in general, I thought, those guys that came in early did a nice job. Ethan Lane and Sean Hill, 2 early offensive linemen, were getting reps. They were in the 2 deep this spring because we're still trying to get some of our guys back from the IR, and they were doing a great job, working hard. Jalen Parker, a young linebacker, did some nice things in the practices. We got to see him, and works really hard when he's out there. So there's some good talent in that class. Looking forward to getting them all here, hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Our summer 2 session starts June 22nd, and we're hopeful to have all those guys here by then.
Coach, just to touch on one thing you just said, I totally agree with you in a sense that I think that there's an imbalance in how the Coastal is, and I would love to see more teams play one another. Now, to go on to my original question, you mentioned a few minutes ago how Raleigh was the second best town in the country or whatever. I used to live in Cary, the Morrisville area, just a few blocks from the stadium, and it's a phenomenal area, and you're right. It's probably one of, outside of my hometown of Kannapolis, probably one of my more favorite places in North Carolina. Now, to ask my question, you start the season off with an ACC game, first time in many years. You start off on the road against Louisville, but then you come back and play a very, very tough opener at home with Mississippi State. Now, you've got what I said, I think, to be one of the best home field advantages. I think the crowd and just the total environment at Carter Finley Stadium is just in a league of itself, at least here in the state of North Carolina. But just with that home opener, Louisville on the road, that's a really tough way to start off your 2020 schedule.
Yeah, it is, and I think just in general, our league, there aren't any easy games in our league, period. I think that's the one thing I respect. The coaches in this league, the talent in this league, the skill, the quarterback play. It's a really, really good league. And we start off with Louisville. Coach Satt's done a nice job down there and has a lot of good players back from their team that had a really good season. And then to go play Mike Leach, who I've played against several times when I was in the Big 12. I have great respect for what Mike Leach does. And so, we got 2 great games to open the season, and it's just one of those deals. Sometimes we don't play a schedule like that. Everyone complains about it, and then you have one and everyone's worried about it, So you got to line up and play.
Coach, when you were at Northern Illinois, you were part of a team and you led that program to back-to-back conference championships. Do you feel like that's a point? I know ultimately that's the goal at any school, but at NC State, do you think that's something you guys can do, is just build a championship caliber team year in and year out?
Yeah, I think you got to get there first, and for us, obviously right now, Clemson's the team to beat in the Atlantic and has been since I've been in this conference, and Florida State had a couple years in there. But you got to get through them first, and I think it's just a belief thing with your team. And once you do it one time, then you can do it every time. But it's about getting through a team like that right now is, one of the best teams in college football year in and year out. So we've got to make that thing happen. And we've been close a couple times, just haven't got it done. But I think it always starts with that, and for us, it's one game at a time approach and hopefully put together, a game where you can find that one play to get you over the top.
That definitely can happen. Guys, you have any questions for Coach? Send them in. Just hit the comment on Facebook, hit the comment on Twitter. We'll get you on screen. Coach, we do have one from Lamont Williams. He wants to know, during a normal offseason, do you ever interact with Mack Brown or other ACC coaches?
Yes, we do. We have a weekly ACC head coaches call, so we're all on there together. And generally in the offseason, you'd see each other at fundraisers, at the ACC meetings. Last year we played against each other in a golf tournament. So I've known Mac a long time, and that's the one thing about this profession. As much as you want to beat each other, it is a brotherhood. I do think, we're all from the same cloth that way. We love this game. We love young men, love helping them, grow and mentor them. And it's what it's all about. We love being with these players, and we miss our players. And I think being around coaches is probably the second best thing you can do, and miss being around the coaches as well.
Coach, Mac was on last week, and he was talking about how much better the talent is in North Carolina. You've been here 7-8 years now. What have you noticed about the high school football talent in state, and is it going up, as Mac said?
Well, it's such a fast-growing state. Between Charlotte and Raleigh, you have two of fastest-growing cities in the country, and so the population is getting bigger and bigger. I think the coaches do a really good job here. They are handcuffed a little bit with some of the rules in the spring as far as being able to be on the field as much as they want with their guys. But I think that's even gotten better as I've been here over time. They've gotten more and more opportunities to help these guys develop their skill sets. I think the competition across the state is outstanding. And just being able to watch the state championship games in Carter Finley It doesn't matter the classification. You see really good football players. And the one thing about the state that I love is there's still a lot of kids that play multiple sports, and I really like that. These guys don't get too burned out in one sport. You see them competing in track, you see them competing in basketball, you see them competing in wrestling, and I love that about this state. You can still go watch a guy be a competitor after the football season.
Coach, that's good to hear, because it kind of falls in with one of my question about recruiting. A lot of parents, and I believe players, get into their head certain things about recruiting. And I'd like to know, I asked this question last week, and I'd like to hear from you as far as channels of how you find a player. So a player's undiscovered and you discover a player. Can you tell us maybe a few of the methods or channels that cause players to get discovered?
Well, I think you got to be an assistant coach, first of all, that knows your area. And as a former assistant coach, and I was a recruiting coordinator for a long time, I took a lot of pride in that. You find out who the freshmen are, the sophomores, the juniors, and you go to the school, you come back to the school, hey, you bring your notes out. And, hey, man, last time I was here, you talked about this ninth grader. How's he doing? And coach may tell you, Coach, he's not doing anything. He's lazy, this and that. Or he might be like, yeah, he's right over there. Check him out. He's grown 4 inches. He's a freak. And so you're just trying to keep that, really encyclopedia of guys up to date. I always asked every school when I was in them, hey, is there anybody in the area, anyone you played that really stood out to you? Tried to get that information. And you're just building as many different ways to find where these kids are at. You get to know the youth coaches in the area. You get to know different people that can help you in the communities. And then every now and then you get lucky. You find a guy that other people didn't think was that good or they didn't know much about. It's harder and harder to do that with social media. But, 10 years ago, it was a lot easier to find a guy that nobody was recruiting that was a phenomenal football player. But you still try to do it. You still try to find that diamond in the rough.
Coach, one thing that I wanted to there we go. Hey, Coach, let me kind of expand a little bit on Dale's question here and kind of stick to the recruiting aspect of things. Similar to, how the recruiting or the transfer portal has changed in college athletics, you're starting to see more and more players think that they need to transfer high schools. And you're seeing it yearly, more and more every year, to where they feel they need to go to a different high school to either be noticed by you or just to give themselves a chance to win instead of maybe being on a 2-9 team. What's your thoughts on that for the high school level? Do you think a player needs to change schools to be noticed by you? And overall, Coach Brown last week said that he's not a fan of it, and he would rather see players, regardless of how good or bad their team is, stick with the main team they're play for the brothers that they're with already. But just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's a bad trend. I think that almost every senior I've heard speak in our team meetings that we have during training camp, they get up and talk about their career. And I was no different when I was a player. We all have that day, that horrible day at the school we went to. We're like, what are we doing here? You think about leaving, and then you don't, because you love the guys you're with, and those teammates in the locker room, they are like your brothers. And had you left them, what would it have been like, and every single player, man, I'm so glad I stayed here. NC State's done this, or my school's done this. I will say occasionally I do think there's a bad fit. Sometimes a kid needs a new start somewhere else. But to see it the way it is now, where a guy's a backup and he's not willing to fight to win a job, so he just gets up and leaves, or the coach maybe was hard on him one day and he gets up and leaves, or they lost a game and he gets up and leaves. I think that's bad for our young men. I really do. I think they need to learn how to deal with adversity at a young age. I think they need to learn how to deal with loss. I think they got to learn how to fight and scratch and win a job. And I think they got to learn, to do things on their own a little bit. You see a lot of parents trying to step in and fix these kids' problems for them instead of saying, hey, why don't you go to your coach and find out how you can beat that kid out, and then let's go do it. Are there situations where transferring is a good thing for a young man? Yes, there is. Absolutely. But I think it's become an easy way out that I don't like, because I think that that's one of the things athletics teaches you is how to compete. And I think that's something that makes our country great, is that we have a lot of competitive people in it. And I hate to see that get thrown out the window so easily.
So, Coach, a kid that's a good player and he's starting on his team, but he sees there's another team in his city who's maybe going to state championships or something, and he feels like he's not getting looked at, but going to that school will get him looked at. Is that really going to change you looking at the kid positively or even looking at him?
I would tell you, if he's a good player, we're going to find him. I can't speak for that player. I don't know who that player is on how much he's struggling, in the locker room he's in because of the losing and different things like that. But if he's a really good player, a Division I type player with all the things these guys have now, from camps to combines to 7-on-7s, I mean, you name it, we're going to find them. And I don't think they need to do that to get discovered. They may need to do that to win, but not to be discovered as a recruit.
I couldn't agree.
So if a kid were to, you didn't know him, you never talked to him, and he goes to Carolina, and Carolina finds him, and he's a star there, you'd be rather upset with your recruiting staff, would you not?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're going to find, that's your job, is to find the players. The key thing I'm wanting to get out to young people is, if you're good, you're going to be found.
Amen.
Dale's big on that. Coach, last question I have for you, actually. 3 years ago, you got offered a job at Tennessee, to jump to the SEC, to the quote-unquote big time, and you decided to stay at NC State. I've always wondered, and I read a lot about it, but I just wanted to hear from you. What made you decide to stay at NC State and keep it going in Raleigh?
Well, first of all, we love it here. My sons love it here. We don't do anything without discussing these things as a family, and I don't feel like professionally I had done everything I set out to do here. I want to win a championship at this university for these young men. My sons did not want to leave their schools, and as their father, for me to be able to say that they went to these schools in Raleigh and graduated from these schools in Raleigh, and not have to uproot them, because a lot of times in coaching you don't get the opportunity to make that choice. They choose it for you. And just contemplating it and sitting down with Sarah and then talking to Chancellor Woodson, talking to Debbie, they gave me an extension, gave me more security. And at the time I had a 3-year deal, and they gave me a 5-year deal, which obviously in recruiting, that's a big thing. These young men want to go somewhere where their head coach is going to be with them. And so it all just kind of came together. And, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to talk with Tennessee, but at the end of the day, this is home for us, and it's where we want to be.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, especially on a holiday. I hope you had a great holiday. Didn't eat too many burgers.
No, man, I appreciate you having me. I will tell you cut into my Memorial Day fun a little bit having to do this.
Well,
but
thanks again.
I do appreciate you guys. And Dale, I do appreciate you wearing red. And I see the helmet on your mantle up there, buddy.
I want to tell you this, that helmet up there. So I have 4 children, and I've had that helmet for over 30 years. And when every child came home from the hospital, that's the first thing that I showed them.
You're the man. Well, I appreciate you guys. And Chris, thanks for your service.
You're first class, Coach. Thank you, sir.
Thank you guys.
All right,
Go
Coach. Take care of yourself, man. That is Dave Doeren, the head football coach at NC State. Thanks for coming on with us, Coach.
That was awesome.
And as usual, we got to bring in my man, the originator, Sam Griner, who is a pretty decent friend of Coach Doeren.
Yes.
And there's some rules that we can't have you on when we have coaches on, because you're a high school coach again. But what's your reaction to what you heard from Coach Doeren?
He's the biggest stand-up guy I know in the business. I mean, he's phenomenal what he does, and he's the one guy that can actually, he'll take his shirt off for you in the back, whatever he's got to do for you, he's there for you, and he means it. A lot of people don't get Dave Doeren, but he is the most stand-up guy I know in the business. Anytime I call him, he answers. He's one of the few if he can't talk right then, he'll say, "Hey, I'll call you back, coach, in just a little bit. I'm doing this, such and such." He's just always been there, and I really appreciate that. Like he said, when he talks to his family about before he makes a decision, he really means that. A lot of people might say that. He lives that, and I think that's a very big attribute that Dave has.
All right. Well, guys, we got the newest members of our Talking Preps crew. Matt Morrow, who you guys met last week, Charlotte Football Insiders, and Gary Richmond, who had some technical difficulties last week. But Gary, you're looking mighty fine today, sir.
Thanks for having me.
What are your thoughts on what you heard from Coach?
It's kind of like what the Coach Brown said last week as far as recruiting and the upcoming season. It's a lot of unknown right now, and each week you find out a little bit more as far as what the process is going to be as far as when they get back to playing. And last week the NCAA said June 1st, and then the ACC met, and they said they're going to leave it up to their schools, the individual schools, as to what time they can come back after June 1st. And so each week we find out a little bit more.
Matt, your thoughts?
Yeah, there were a couple things that I thought were very interesting from Coach Doeren. I agree. He was well-spoken, represented his team very well throughout that whole interview. The first thing about the coaching changes up at State, that was very interesting. The way he kind of described that process kind of sounded like, of course he was attached to his guys, but, he kind of felt like he needed to move some guys around and maybe give them a shot in the arm. And then it was kind of refreshing to hear his thoughts on player movement. I think a lot of times we kind of paint things with a broad brush and we say, well, a player shouldn't move at all because that's not the right thing to do. It's good to hear him kind of reflect and say that maybe every situation isn't great for a player. And, it sounds like that's something that if they're recruiting a guy, they wouldn't hold that against the kid necessarily if they did, change schools in high school to maybe find a better fit or a better situation for him. So those two things really stuck with me. But that was very good for him.
Yeah, no, I think it was great. All right, guys, we have I want to get you guys' thoughts on what Governor Cooper put out in terms of what he's going to allow, not going to allow in terms of youth sports and high school sports coming back. But before I have you guys talk about that, I also want to bring on a couple of our basketball people. We got Rick Lewis and Christy Mitchell, and we're gonna come back to I don't know what I'm doing. We're gonna come back to Matt, and we're gonna bring in Randall Clark as well. And Sam, I love you, but basketball is not your thing, so we're gonna bring you back in a minute. Guys, what did you think about what you heard from Governor Cooper in terms of bringing sports back this weekend? Coach Lewis, we'll let you start. You're the elder statesman.
Well, I personally see both sides of the issue.
Go ahead, Coach.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I personally see both sides of the issue. I know safety's first, but I think the $1 million question that we have right now is what's the new norm going to be and what the protocol is going to be for health concerns. We talked about, having events and, having hand sanitizer there, also having the people wear masks and also have a nurse there to take the temperature of the players. So there's a lot of ifs and owns we just don't know about yet. So I'm like everybody else, just waiting to see what happens and transfer late down the road.
Randall, your thoughts?
I thought it was interesting just to hear how they split up the sports. Obviously, the non-contact sports coming back makes sense first, but kind of piggyback off what Coach Lewis just said is it's going to be really interesting to see how we get back to a new normal in basketball. Checking people's temperatures and wearing masks is just going to be really weird. And basketball is a contact sport as well, where they don't have pads and gloves on. So I'm really just waiting to see how this is all going to shake out.
I agree with both of you. I think that, I'm itching just like everybody else. I want to be back in the gym with my girls. I miss being at school. I'd much rather be at school working right now than being at home every day. I, stayed in constant contact with my girls and making sure they're, still working out, make sure they're still doing things every single day. And they're getting bored as well, staying at home. I'm ready to get back in it, but, I'm a little leery as well, as far as, what are the new norms? What's going to happen? I mean, if every school is going to have their athletic trainer present at every single practice, I mean, the district's going to have to add on some extra athletic trainers, because, to stay for every single workout, for the trainers, I think it's going to be really tough. I just got word from my athletic director, Jose Garcia, that told me that Oklahoma just opened back up starting June 1st with no restrictions at all. So they go back in practicing with, just like it was when we left in March.
What do you guys expect to see? What do you guys expect to see from the association tomorrow in terms of, can basketball and football come back? We know that baseball and some of the non-contact sports, like, they're going to be okay, but do you expect that they'll allow basketball and football to have some non-contact drills, at least get back on the field? And Gary, we'll let you start there.
I expect they do, because those are the two main sports in North Carolina as far as producing revenue. And we know football carries the weight of most schools' athletic budget. And those kids have to get in conditioned to play in the fall. And many of them haven't had access to weight rooms since early March. And so they're going to have to figure out some way to at least allow those kids to train, maybe not sports specific training, but at least conditioning where they can get out on a field where, you can social distance on a field and condition in that manner. And then maybe have smaller groups, use the weight rooms. With football, most schools have anywhere from 6 to 10 assistants. And so you can kind of space it out that way, where you have some guys outside, some inside. But those are the two big ones that I think most people want to know. How are you going to let football and basketball get started again? Because they drive the revenue stream for all athletics in high school.
Randall.
What I expect to happen, what I think should happen, I guess I should say, is go to kind of how they used to do it in college. You're going to four-man workouts to where there's no contact. And maybe you're able to 4 to 6 man, where maybe you're able to split the team up, and half the basketball players can be on the floor doing stuff at their own separate basket while the other guys are getting their lift in, and then you just switch it. I hope that that's something that we're able to work towards. I really don't want them to say no to basketball and football, because just like Gary just said, it's such a high revenue sport. Both of those, for the whole state. You really just want them to be able to get back in some sort of fashion, kind of into their normal routine of summer workouts and being able to get on the floor with their coaches.
Yeah. And for Christy and Rick, you guys run tournaments, and both of you guys are going to have tournaments in November. What kind of thought have you given to, if at all, how the tournament might be different? Less fans, no fans, screening. I mean, any kind of thoughts, Christy, and then Rick, you can follow her. Just how are you guys going to run the tournaments differently? We
actually have started thinking about that already. And what we're looking at maybe doing is starting our tournament on Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and having, a set of games on Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, just to kind of, separate the crowds, where you're not having, we have 8 games or 8 time slots a day. So that's 16 games between 2 gyms that you can see. So if we spread that out amongst 3 days, maybe we'll kind of lessen the crowds a little bit. We've looked into, do we need to buy, have part of the check-in process for the players? Do we need to buy, thermometers? Do we need to have nurses there? I mean, we've started looking into a lot of different possibilities that this may be, maybe really different for us in November.
Coach Lewis.
Well, the main thing that we're working on is trying to, work out the kinks so we can live stream almost every single game that we have. And I think that's probably going to be the most important thing. If they do come out with restrictions as far as social distancing and the number of fans that can attend a game. Right now, we have no idea how many fans can attend. a couple of weeks from now, they may say, okay, everybody can attend, but you have to wear a mask. And we just don't know what the protocol is going to be at this point in time. But for right now, we're planning on the worst case scenario, and hopefully that we'll be able to live stream each and every game.
Yeah, it's going to definitely be a different world. Well, basketball people, I appreciate you guys kind of joining us a little bit out of season to get your thoughts. Maybe have you on next week when the association puts out their guidelines tomorrow and we find out what's really allowed and what's really not. But thanks for coming on with us, and we're definitely going to catch you next time.
Thank you.
See you later.
You're hanging around with us.
I got you.
All right, we're going to bring back Mr. Griner.
Hey.
Hey, man. Tell me what you think is going to happen. You're a football coach. What do you think is going to happen when we get back to the association's thing on tomorrow? What are they going to announce, Coach Griner?
The sad thing is, I honestly think that they're going to hold football till contact getting together, because it's almost impossible unless you're just doing conditioning. But they might allow us to do conditioning right now, which would be fantastic. I actually talked to Chadwick the other day, and that's what he thinks is going to happen as well, where we just allowed to do conditioning type stuff where we're not touching one another. And then hopefully on August 1st, this stuff dials down enough that we can actually get back to real football, and then we won't miss a beat. If we're able to do that, we'll still have a successful season, and everybody will get the ground running in August, and we'll be able to accomplish it and have good football.
All right, here's a question for the whole room. I'm going to start with Matt. You're a former football coach. How much practice time is needed? Because it seems like in the old days, everybody really didn't start till August 1st, but now you guys start way back in June. How much is really needed if we do have to miss time? And we'll start with Matt, but we'll go to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that, Langston, talking with a couple of coaches. Some guys were trying to think back to how it was 20 years ago and kind of prepare their schedules that way. But realistically, we've seen so much 7-on-7 going on throughout the summer months and everything. But if we're just going to condition to get into the football season, probably a good month, I would say, because you see some kids really grinding and working out. But for every kid that you do see, you probably got 3 or 4 that's just sitting around eating donuts and not doing nothing. So that's something you really have to consider when you're trying to plan on when you can get guys ready and get them good to go. Everyone's not going to be on the same level. So you got to at least allow for 4 weeks of good conditioning and getting into shape to play a full season.
Now, I was going to go to Gary on a quick one shot. Did y'all notice how Matt, off camera, got light better all of a sudden? Did y'all notice that? Just magic, Jimmy snapped and he got light. Gary, your thoughts? Same question.
I think they can start August 1st. I think the conditioning is the key, is that they allow them at least 3 or 4 weeks of conditioning prior to August 1st. And, most teams are returning the same system. Somebody like Sam would be at a disadvantage because he has to implement a new system. I think the schools that have returning players and returning coaches running the same system will definitely have an advantage over schools that are bringing in a new coaching staff.
And I'm the same way in a sense that I don't think you need if the drop dead date of starting back high school football is August 1st and that's the day players show up, then I don't see anything that's going to prevent them from playing their first game August 21st as scheduled. Now, I've heard some people say 3-4 weeks, but I think 21 days is enough to get someone in shape and ready to play. Now, will the quality of football be as good as if they're not doing 7-on-7s and stuff during the summer? No, probably not. But for 100 years, even 30 years ago, back when I was in school, we showed up August 1st with very little. So I think at a minimum, they should be able to play safely. But again, it kind of goes back to the quality. Will it be the best games? Probably not. But if everybody's on the same playing field, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, great points, Chris. And to Gary's point that we'll be in a little bit of a disadvantage. It can have 2 different parts to this. So look at it like this. Say these players have been numb to what they've always done throughout the whole summer. Sometimes those players might be sitting at home more playing video games, but now all of a sudden maybe at West Charlotte there's some excitement that's going on. There's something new. Something new is always refreshing sometimes. So now these kids are working on their own. So I might receive kids in August that are actually more conditioned than someone that's been with them for 4 years because they're lukewarm to the situation. So it can kind of go both ways. At least I'm trying to believe that in my own head that I have an advantage. And sometimes you got to create that type of chip to be successful.
Yeah, back in the 70s, if there was any conditioning before the season, it was all self-motivated. So that's one thing players can be doing right now as far as conditioning is concerned, is they can do a lot of that themselves. I think the impact is a Sam, a Mallard Creek, anybody that's got a new staff coming in, that whole chemistry to the team is lost and has not had an opportunity to be built. So I think conditioning is highly important. The skill drills are important, and hopefully we can get to some of those, because we kind of mentioned this last week. When you go to practice, you break off into groups, and you got your linemen together, your wide receivers, quarterbacks, and you got everybody broken out. So distancing can be done there, but I think the teams that will be successful be the ones that have returning staffs and seniors that can help lead, or seniors and juniors that will be able to help pull that team together. Otherwise, it's going to be tougher, and they're going to be behind. The Sams and the other coaches are going to be a little bit behind in that full team chemistry.
Absolutely. Guys, we got a new face on Talking Preps, Coach Hickman, Brett Hickman, West Brunswick High School. Welcome to the show, sir.
I appreciate you guys having me. Dale went fanboy with his Coach Doeren Wolfpack gear, and Chris Hughes has a West Brunswick helmet behind him. So we're doing good.
The West Brunswick was intentional.
The Michigan Wings, we've been wearing them for 30 years. So good to see you guys.
I don't know if that helmet's legal anymore, though. That thing's a throwback.
Well, I think I gave him one that was didn't pass.
There's no pads in it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I didn't give him one of the good ones. We don't have that kind of money down here at the beach.
Coach, we were talking earlier about Governor Cooper's recommendations about what could and could not come back, and what you said really struck me this past week on Twitter, and I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on what you were saying this past weekend when you were on Twitter.
Well, you just got so many layers and factors to play in high school football, and I think we've hit so much on the whole situation sucks. I mean, there's no way to make it any better than it is. But I haven't heard a whole lot of people talk about the consequences of what if we don't play. And certainly I heard one of you mention the financial ramifications because of what football and basketball bring to athletic budgets. What's not being touched on a lot is the factors of recruiting. I coached college football for 9 years. And I just had 6 kids sign this past year, and only one of them had an offer before last year. So when somebody says it's just one season, they'll get over it. Well, I had 5 guys who earned a scholarship offer their senior year, and that's life-changing for families. And, I think I signed 52 kids over 9 years as the lead recruiter in college football. And some of those kids came from backgrounds where they were the first ones to ever earn that. So, I believe strongly, that football can be that avenue. And the reality is, and not many people want to talk about it, but by sheer roster size, Langston, we touch every socioeconomic group in a school building. We touch the rich, we touch the poor, we touch the white, we touch the black, we touch the single parent home, we touch the grandparent home. And, for the beauty of this game, and I've been around it my entire life, my dad was a longtime high school football coach down here. I'm coaching at my alma mater, and I'm passionate about this. I can remember being maybe 8 or 9 years old and leaving a summer workout with him and my brother. And we started snickering as he dropped a kid off over what how the kid lived at home. And I'll never forget the lecture and the lesson and probably the physical ramifications we got for being that at 8 or 9 years old. But I've never forgot that lesson my father taught me. And he still gets a look in his eye when kids come back, and well, they're not kids now. A lot of these guys are 35, 40 years old. That's a powerful thing when those guys come up and they in fact, that kid who I was mentioning, who's now 40 years old and works for Duke Energy, went off to play at Lenore Ryan, and he lived in basically what amounted to a shack. And as my brother and I were laughing and giggling at 8 or 9 years old, men like my father gave kids these opportunities their whole life, and it's just one season, but that's 5 months we get to put our arms around them. That's 5 months we get to love them. That's 5 months we get to hug them. That's 5 months our coaches get to have them in their homes, and they might see us as fathers and husbands. And, there's real consequences to the idea of not playing football. And, I'm passionate about it because it's my ministry.
Got your reaction, what he's saying there. Do you agree, disagree?
Well said from Coach Hickman. Like he said, it's his ministry. This is more than football. Like, I know it brings in the revenue, it does a lot of different things, but like, I'm here to build treasures that last forever. And I know Coach is willing to do the same thing. You build relationships that will literally last forever. Like, they'll come back when they're 40 years old, and I'll probably be 90 by then. But I don't know if I'll still be here. Hopefully not. I don't know if I can make it that long. But that's the whole important part, building those relationships that last forever, making an impact. Every week I get probably 3 or 4 messages or DMs and just saying, "Hey, Coach, I don't know if you remember me." Of course I remember you, and it's a great feeling to hear back from these guys. It really is.
Dale, your thoughts there?
Oh, I like what he said because it's just right in sync with the way I think, and that football is more than a game. And certainly the recruiting aspects of it are important, but the whole thing that I mentioned before about chemistry that gets built, those relationships, and that there's just so much more mental going on with this game that right now is being lost. Even though we're not playing Friday nights, there's still a lot of that whole cohesion that takes place this time of year that's not taking place for these kids. And my concern, as I asked earlier back a few weeks ago, was about the mental aspect of all this, how this is impacting those kids. And to be a good player, you got to have that motivation of challenge and competition, and they're not allowed to have that, and they're not allowed to have that camaraderie. So, Coach, I'm with you 100%. Well said.
Yeah. Can I say one thing that I'm really worried about? One thing I'm really worried about is this. I don't know if we're taking this into consideration. We see everybody walking around with the sanitizer, the mask, and things like this. Well, your immune system really needs germs a lot of times to build its immune system. If we're all quarantined for months at our house and not getting any other germs, what's going to happen when we really do get together, when a common cold is more reasonable to get, or another type of flu or something? Like, our immune system is going to be really down because we're not around to interact with people. We're made to be around people. We need those type of germs. We need that in our life. And it's kind of unique when we get back together and we're touching one another and playing football and sweating, the whole deal. Like, it's going to be very concerning how that's going to happen, just regular sickness getting over it.
Dale, I would imagine you have a very strong response to that, so I'm going to let you go.
You want me to?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, obviously, first of all, my daughter had COVID-19, and her husband not only spent time in the hospital, but in ICU. So I've done a lot of study on this stuff. And Sam, I appreciate what you're saying, and that's something I hear from my sons all the time. But there's certain things we can't build immunity to. You mentioned the common cold. A common cold immunity is a very, very short months time frame. I've had enough colds in my life that I should never get a cold, but there's so many different strains of the cold. And, I know we need germs to build our immune systems. I fully agree with that. But I also know that there are certain times we have things that we don't know, and we have to be cautious in how we move forward with those things that we haven't unknown. Kind of like playing a football game against a team you've never seen. And then when you see them step off the bus, the smallest guy, 6'5", 270, and runs a 4.40. I don't know. I mean, there some things you don't know and you can't prepare for. And I'm in full acceptance of we need germs to build our immune system. But I also think Like a good coach, you got to scheme a good defense because sometimes you can't protect against everything.
Matt, I see that some of the European schools are going back and they're saying their cases have not gone up dramatically, and they're not 1,000% certain this can pass between kid to adult. Do you think the United States should follow that and we should go back to school in the fall, and then that would allow us to have football?
Well, my thoughts are we need to wait and see what happens. Mm-hmm. We need to plan to come back to school. So all the plans should be in place and protocols put in place. But certainly we have to look and see what happens as we're opening up. Are we creating more spread? And what happens with that? When you look at Europe, and in my business, I deal a lot with Europeans. I've dealt a lot with Asians and Europeans in business, and their cultures are different than ours. Their interactions with each other are much different. So their social interactions in most of those countries is far different than it is here. So it's kind of hard to look in one place, just like here in this country. People interact differently in different parts of the country. You'll get a hug down here. If you try to hug a guy up in New York, he's going to stick you with a knife. So, it's just a whole different. Don't think we can look at that one situation. We have to look at our situation and see where things are going. We need to plan to do everything. We should have everything on that. We're playing the first Friday night and kids are in school and everybody's going fine. But hopefully our leaders are putting in proper protocols for us to do that.
Mm-hmm. I think some of the context of kind of what I said on Twitter, people might not have taken it the right way. And I think, Governor Cooper or whatever and our state educational leaders and our individual LEAs and our principals, they've been so focused on getting to the end of this school year and making sure seniors can graduate. And their next priority is going to be what the school day is going to look like. It's not going to be about high school football, and I think as educators, we've got to respect that. I think there's so much work has been going on by, our principal and our administrative staff down here in Brunswick County Schools, and they've done a great job trying to honor these seniors as much as they can under the protocols. I'm probably a little different than most football coaches in that I'm not in the weight room. I'm not a PE teacher. I'm a history teacher. So, I'm a little concerned at remote learning being a thing that happens more and more, and we do the A days and B day things because after we left on March the 13th or whatever day that was, and we didn't come back to school, participation is not as good. It's not. I mean, we can say what we want to say. We've got to be able, if we do this, our first priority's got to be getting the educational system back on its feet and teaching all 1,500 kids at West Brunswick or however many Sam's got at West Charlotte or wherever, that's the first priority. But at the same point, we're all football people here, and we understand, the fabric of Americana, as I like to call it, is high school football on a Friday night. And it's not just the football team. It's not just the coaches. It's the student sections. It's the bands. It's the dance teams, and it's the cheerleaders, and it's communities coming together. So hopefully, we're going to be able to find out some answers here over the course of the next few weeks where we can get back as close to normal as possible, get back into the educational business and get back into what we all love, and that's high school football.
Yeah. Matt, what would you say to Q Tucker? She's getting ready to make her big announcements tomorrow in terms of high school football and basketball, because everybody wants to know what's going to happen with the contact sports.
What I would say to Q is, number one, include the coaches. I would really love for the NCHSAA to come out and have a plan, like everyone's been saying, to just say, hey, we want to form a committee and look at some guidelines. National Federation of High School Athletics put out some phased guidelines. So I think that's going to be the playbook that the NCHSAA is going to follow. But we do need to have a committee to kind of break it down for North Carolina and see do we need to follow those guidelines step by step, phase by phase, or can we kind of, do things a little differently because we're not necessarily a hot button state as far as the coronavirus pandemic has been going?
And I've seen the comment there from head coach Russell Stone at Hickory High School, kind of referring back, and there it is right there. He is right on the online learning. It is not effective. As a parent with two kids, school age that I see every day, 100% correct. Great students, but even the best students in a home environment is just not going to be as engaged as they were when they're in the classroom setting with that supervision that they need. So I have to agree with Coach Stone and with what Coach Hickman said. Now back to the original question from you, Langston, in regarding to what we expect from Q Tucker. Here's the only thing that I really want to see is that whatever guidelines they put in place, that they are followed by all 114 LEAs in the state. And that's the 100 county systems, the few city school systems we have. You know that every system may implement their own standards that are even further above the standard than maybe what is typically out there. Sometimes the larger systems like CMS or Wake County or Guilford County or Cumberland or Forsyth up here, well, sometimes, because they've got so many more schools, we'll kind of squeeze it together and just err on the side of caution and say you're not doing that. And when that happens, you may have, let's just say, a Richmond County who has far more abilities to do something in the summer versus maybe Olympic or Mallard Creek or West Charlotte. So I just hope that there's some consistency along the lines for all the systems, so one team maybe isn't more prepared than another.
All right. Coach Hickman, before I let you go, I just want to kind of get your thoughts on how do you think is the best way to move forward? I know football is so important to you. I know you don't want kids to get left behind. What do you think is the best way we can move forward to try to have football? Is it no fans, few fans, testing? I know I've been talking about some helmets. What do you think?
You know what? I wish I was smart enough to figure all that out. I think that's the thing that you recognize when you're in our position. None of us are qualified to make scientific suggestions. I mean, that's just not who we are. We do understand the consequences of, what if football's played with fans, with limited fans, with no fans, what that's going to do to the athletic department. So, I think the state government and leadership people in general are in impossible situations to make everybody happy right now. I think Q needs to be commended for what she's done since March the 13th. And she took some flack for some of the stuff with the basketball state championships, but she's been hit on spot on and she's been very transparent. I felt, enough to send her a private email 3 or 4 weeks ago. I'm sure she wouldn't mind sharing, but I think she's been very transparent with everybody. So, they're going to be hard discussions to have. I do think because not all size fits all. This is such a unique state, where you guys are in Charlotte, where you just got so many people, and you got so many people up in Wake County. We're a little bit different here in Brunswick, but, I talked to my good friend Mike Setzer the other night, who's just an hour down the road in Robinson County and at the head coach at St. Paul's, which ironically is a school my dad used to coach at. They're getting hit a lot harder in Robinson and Columbus County with COVID-19 than we are in Brunswick County. So, is it going to be something where it's not a state rule, where it's down to individual LEAs? Does Brunswick County schools and New Hanover County schools follow a certain different set of protocols as far as who's allowed in the stadium, as opposed to Robinson County or Mecklenburg County or Swain County out in the western part of the state? I think the discussions are going to have to be had, but we need to have them, and we need to have them together with superintendents and athletic directors and football coaches to do, the ultimate goal is to be right by the kids. I've always said that. That's why we're in education. That's why we do what we do. But I'd sure like to see Rourke Stadium packed like it was last Friday night with 3,000 or 4,000 clad in green and trying to win football games again. That's my hope. Is that realistic at this point? Who knows?
Yeah. Well, Coach, thank you for joining us. I love your passion. It caught me on Saturday morning looking at my iPhone, laying in the bed. I said, man, this guy's really passionate about these issues, and I loved your arguments. And hopefully you'll come back on during a season. Hopefully we'll have a season. We can talk some football instead of talking about will there be football. But thanks for coming on with us, Coach.
I would have loved to come on when I had 23 seniors and a really good football team. That would have been real fun. I was walking down the street the other day, man, and the guy who used to play for my dad asked me, he said, Coach, we won 10 last year. We're gonna win it all next year. I was like, Al, you tell me who's gonna snap that ball, baby. That's what I'm worried about right now. So we all got problems, and appreciate what all you guys do for high school athletics. Sam, congratulations to you. Chris, thank you for your service. And a quick shout out. I got a kid, Tyler Tate, who played for us our first year, talking about he left to go to San Antonio, joined the Air Force. He starts this week, so he's in our prayers. Thank you. And thank you guys for having me tonight. I'm going to go hug my children to sleep now.
Thank you.
All right. Coach. Man.
Thank you, Coach.
All right, that's Brett Hickman, the head football coach at West Brunswick High School. We're going to bring Mr. Richmond back on. Gary, you heard a lot back there in the green room. Give me your thoughts. What should Q do this year? What do you think is the protocol for football? Your stage. Just talk about what you heard.
Well, I think, like someone said earlier, they're gonna follow the federal or the national guidelines. They're going to take the advice of the governors, and I think she's going to come out with a North Carolina stage of progression as far as how we're going to transition into sports. And then I think, just the previous coach Hickman, he's a classroom teacher like I was. And one of the things as a teacher, you always learn best case scenarios or best practices, where you have to go to these workshops and learn what other people are doing. And coaches by nature sometimes are secretive because they don't want the opponent to know what they're doing. They want to hide their strategy. But in this case, I think coaches are going to have to share best practices when it comes to how they're going to transition from being sheltered into getting back to playing sports. I think there's going to have to be a lot of sharing among coaches, among school systems, among states of best practices.
Yeah, Matt, I think that I was looking at some of the CDC guidelines about how to bring sports back. One thing they were saying was keep the geography close. Don't have kids from one location going to play another location. That's going to make if we play football, we're going to have some changes in schedules, don't you think?
Yeah, it's something that we definitely have to look at. One of the things that I do want to talk about as far as, keeping your players together is if we go into phase one of workouts, if you look at those National Federation of guidelines, they even say to keep the same players working out together in groups of less than 10. So, I mean, we're talking about something that they're taking very serious from the CDC. And if we're talking about interstate matchups, like the big game at Bank of America Stadium that you've been promoting, Langston, that's going to be a big concern that we're going to have to look at and say, can we mix, those kind of teams together from different geographical areas, even though we're only talking about Charlotte and Rock Hill. When we're talking about this coronavirus, you look at York County versus Mecklenburg County, there's a big difference right there. So it's unfortunate, but yeah, that is a huge consideration. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would think some of these big games like Myers Park playing on ESPN against Deion Sanderson's son's team, that's probably out the window. That's going to be really hard to pull off. Yeah. Sam, you started the show with me back in the past. I want to give you the last word. Take us home. What's on your mind?
Just I really appreciate this panel. It's amazing Dave Doeren at the beginning, well-spoken guy, just a stand-up guy that represents NC State very well. But just, having Gary on, having the Pet Man on, joining Dell and Chris, and, Langston, you've done a phenomenal job. I just think that being able to do this together, it's really built a great bondship. And I think that our ideas getting out to one another, feeding off one another, it does a good job. And I would love to see, Pep was talking about, I would love to see us at least in the phase one things, get 10 guys out there on the field. And if we have someone giving us a temperature before we came out there, before they can enter the field, keeping it at 10 people and then growing from that, see if there's any issues. maybe like, spoon feeding the situation to see if we're able to progress instead of just going all back at once. I think that would be a safe route to go. And, prayer is a big thing. Hopefully it works out for us.
Yeah. All right, guys. Look, we've been going at it for a while. Thank you guys for coming on. We're going to work on another special guest next week. Isn't that right, Coach Griner?
I got you, brother.
All right. He got me. We're going to work on one for next week. But thanks, guys, for coming on, man. I love the camaraderie building. And we'll see you guys next Monday at 7.
See you.
Later, man.
See you guys.
Take care. Peace.